Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Shawn. Our City Club is off today. The Denver Broncos are out at Dove Valley. Training camp has begun in earnest with the practices underway. Bo Nix with the lion's share of the snaps today at quarterback. As I told you before, as we've told you really all summer long, there is no quarterback competition. Bo Nix is QB1. Bo Nix is going to be QB1. The question is how quickly it will be. The plan for the Broncos is on week 1 and on practice 1. Bo Nix ends up taking the most snaps. So you can, get around all the stuff. And when you hear people say that, big quarterback competition going along. Okay. Fine. Obviously, it's sports. Everyone has to compete for their spot. Nikola Jokic probably has to make sure with the Denver Nuggets that obviously he can't just, dog it in training camp and expect everything to land his way. But there is no competition. There's no competition there at all. Just like there's no competition for CB1. That's Pat Surtain, whether he has a bad camp or otherwise. This is Bo Nix's job. And Sean Payton made it very, very clear with the way that the snaps were handed out on practice number 1 that it's Bo Nix's job to lose. So let's get past that. We'll talk about Bo Nix a little bit over the course of the training camp and preseason. Plenty, I'm sure. But let's start with something that's a little more interesting because it was up in the air. Unlike Bo Nix being QB1, that was always going to be the case. None of this is new. The fact that Nix, the quarterback competition, as you have it, is already over. It never really was a thing. But Courtland Sutton's situation was interesting. Back in June, he called the contract holdout a stalemate, and holdout, I guess, too strong a term. On the contract, yes. When it came to joining the Broncos at mandatory OTAs, voluntary he skipped, mandatory, he was there and made sure that it made it easy for the Broncos to kind of meet in the middle. We've talked about this contract for a while. Sutton had a good year last year, a good year on a bad Broncos offense. And so did he deserve a bump? He most certainly probably did. The minimum amount of guaranteed money is a problem on his deal, but the Broncos were in no position to give it out. They haven't had any reason to give it out despite the good year. So they're stuck in a weird spot. Sutton, who has had an inconsistent career in part due to injuries, in other part due to multiple head coaches, multiple coordinators, multiple quarterbacks, things that were not his fault, obviously has had inconsistency. And so as a result, there's just trying to find a way to meet in the middle. Well, that apparently happened because Sutton, according to multiple media reports, agreed to a contract restructure that will pay him a little more money, can get him up to $15.2 million this season. The contract still runs through next year, but the base of about $13 million, $1.5 million in additional incentives, and the roster bonuses are already there, could pay him as much as $15.2 million. That bumps his cap number up to about $17.4 million, which is the second highest on the team behind only starting left tackle Garrett Bowles. DJ Jones is third at $12.9 million, and no other Denver Bronco, or only 3 on the entire roster, that have a cap hit of more than $10 million. Again, further showing what the Broncos intend to be doing in the short term and the long term. DJ Jones and Garrett Bowles, free agents after the year. Only Courtland Sutton out of those 3 has a contract option for next year, although the guaranteed money on it is extraordinarily minimal. So that part of it is very interesting as well. That is part of the indication we talked about a little bit yesterday, with Quinn Miner's new deal that kicks in and really starts to ramp up about 2026. What you're seeing realistically with this contract for Sutton and the contracts for Miners is that the Broncos understand that their rebuild is fully underway and their target date to contend. And we're talking about actions, not words, because look, I don't mean to besmirch the Denver Broncos or any other sports team or any other anything. This is America, right? Everybody is selling something. Sports teams are selling something. The Denver Broncos are selling hope. They're selling their future, but they don't want to tell you that it's not going to be this year, and it probably won't be next year. So I'll tell you, it won't be this year, and it probably won't be next year. Follow what the Broncos do, not what they say. And I'd suggest that for every single team, every single outlet, all of it. Watch what they do. And the Broncos are making sure that this year and next year, they're clearing off as much money as they can. They're front loading as much as they can. Obviously, they understand that Courtland Sutton can help Bo Nix in his rookie year. And so they want to keep him on and they want to keep him happy. So they give him a bit of a bump here, an opportunity at least to make more money. and that opportunity he can take advantage of or not. And then, given 1 year left on his contract, maybe a trade could be in the offing, a signing could be in the offing. We'll see. There are a lot of different ways that this could go. But Sutton has been very clear, especially throughout this process, that the offseason was difficult for him. He had surgery at the end of last year, despite having 10 touchdowns, which, by the way, was tied for fourth in the league. Back in June, he talked a little bit about the challenges that he was dealing with in the offseason.
Yeah, I was down in Florida doing some rehab. As you all know, I had some surgery. Had surgery on my ankle from the last game, so I linked up with the training staff here. They sent me down to Florida to a guy that they were comfortable with, and was down there working with him, getting my ankle right. Was having a really good rehab process, and you know, talking to the team. They, coach and I were on the same page of me being able to stay down there and continue to get my ankle to where I needed to get to so that, ultimately be able to get ready for the season.
The Broncos also made it clear, and Sean Payton made it clear at times, that they had no issue with what Courtland Sutton was doing, even though Payton a couple times kind of laughed off the idea of a new contract in a sort of a coy kind of way. That was never going to happen. This was a weird spot. This was the spot where if Courtland Sutton really wanted to, I guess he could have demanded a trade, and maybe he could have gotten it, but the Broncos had no reason in a contract that they found to be rather friendly over the next couple of years to move Sutton away whatsoever. And Sutton, obviously, while he'd like more money, well, this is the contract he has. So now that they kind of meet in the middle, seems to be settled for this year. That's good because that stabilizes the wide receiver spot a little bit. Sutton last year was very effective, if not spectacular. 59 catches and 772 yards, as well as the 10 touchdowns. The 10 touchdowns stand out, tied for fourth in the entire league. And that's even more remarkable given that he only had 59 catches. That means 1 out of every 6 catches was a touchdown. That's pretty unusual. But catches barely cracked the top 60 in the league when you're talking about that number. The yards barely cracked the top 50 in the league. So there's still a lot of growth. Now, how much of that was Russell Wilson? How much of that was Sean Payton? How much of that was the line? How much of that was the other talent, which did not entirely bubble up? Jerry Jeudy, part of that. Greg Dulcich' injury, all those sort of things. That's part of the equation, too. But now Sutton has the opportunity to crystallize his role as the number one receiver. He's the clear-cut number one. New addition Josh Reynolds out of Detroit is an interesting player, but has always been a second banana type of guy, if not third, back with his time on the Rams. And that is probably where he'll fit in with the Broncos. The question with the third receiver is whether it's going to be Troy Franklin or Marvin Mims or somebody else. My guess is it will eventually be Troy Franklin, if not at the very beginning of the year, shortly thereafter. He has familiarity with Bo Nix, especially given the fact that he was Nix's leading receiver at Oregon last year. And obviously, the Broncos think highly of him. All of the metrics that you see from his season last year were promising. And the way he tested out at the Combine looked good, too, though you don't want to put a lot of stock in anything you see at the Combine. That's how you end up with Zach Wilson. At least that's how the Jets ended up with Zach Wilson. The Broncos now have Zach Wilson, but they didn't have to pick him number 2 overall in order to do it. Speaking of Wilson, he's the clear number 3 in this quarterback room. I hesitate to call it a competition because there's not one, and we'll see how he goes, despite the fact you might see clips here and there from media people around town showing Zach Wilson complete passes to guys in practice when they're not being covered by defenders, like what happened today. So don't put much stock into that. But in Sutton's case, this is an opportunity maybe to change the direction of his time with the Broncos. One of the most veteran players on the team, one of the most experienced players on the team. Back in June, when he talked about the surgery, he also talked about how the Broncos organization has fit him and how he wants to stay and play his entire career in Denver.
As you all have heard, and I will continue to say, this is where I want to be. This is home. This is where I want to, go hoist the Lombardi Trophy. This is the place where I want to be able to retire. This is a place where I want to hopefully be able to, put enough out, once my career is done, that I can, hopefully be able to have a bid at the, Bronco Ring of Honor. But, those are all things that, have to be earned. And hopefully I'm able to have the time to be able to, continue to showcase that, I'm capable of being in that caliber of people.
He'll have the opportunity to showcase it because, as we pointed out, he's the clear number 1. He's the one that has the most NFL experience, the most NFL ready resume. Obviously, this is a good opportunity for Sutton, and hopefully he ends up making some of that extra money for the Broncos. And then we will see, because if the Broncos don't retain Garrett Bowles, and when you're talking about at least cap hit for 2025, Courtland Sutton would become the team's highest paid player. When you're the highest paid player on a team and you're a wide receiver, you'd better be Justin Jefferson. And there's no expectation that Courtland Sutton is going to become Justin Jefferson no matter what happens this year, and especially with a rookie quarterback. But it is a good fit for a Broncos team that does need more performance when you're talking about the wide receiver spot. Last year, the stats were really quite ugly. And yes, some of that was Wilson. Some of that was the offense. Some of that was the fact the Broncos really couldn't generate any consistent pressure on the ground, and they were having to throw. It's a lot to dissect from last year. But Sutton had 772 yards. That was slightly more than Jerry Jeudy's 758, and only 5 more catches than Jeudy. But the 10 touchdowns compared to 2 stands out. Jeudy, however, is gone. The next leading receiver that is returning for the Broncos is Samaje Perine. And the thought process is that maybe even Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams are battling for the last spot in the running back room. So there is nothing in the way. Franklin will have his chance as a rookie. Reynolds will have his chance as a newcomer via free agency. But it is definitely Sutton's position to take control of. It is Sutton's position to leverage. It is Sutton's position to give himself the best opportunity to have his career going forward the way he wants. And he'd like it to be in Denver. But if it ends up not being in Denver, one way or another, he's going to want to get paid. And that means he'll have to perform. And unfortunately for Sutton, another new quarterback to deal with this time around. So a hard luck run it's been for Courtland Sutton, but at least he does get a little bit of a bone thrown in his direction, even though it's in incentives. He's going to have to earn it and get it back. That's obviously a little bit tricky as well, since that's not entirely in his control. Courtland Sutton's whole career has basically been about dealing with things that are not under his control. Injuries, coaching changes, quarterback changes. And to his credit, he has been pretty flexible, pretty adaptable, and almost uniformly positive when addressing every single one of those. So hopefully this year, a benefit comes to him, and he has an opportunity to maybe get 1,000-yard season and another good number of touchdowns, although 10 seems a little high. We'll talk about some of Courtland Sutton's over-under numbers with our guest Nate Lundy in a little bit. But for Sutton, a big opportunity for him, one way or the other. For the Broncos, a big opportunity as well, because you certainly have Sutton in a make-good year, even though he is under contract for next year. There's all the reasons in the world that Sutton would want to have his very best year as a Denver Bronco, even if it means the team will not be hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. And again, spoiler alert, it won't. So the goals for the Broncos have to change, and the goals for Sutton are part of that as well. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Broncos in a minute, specifically the pass rush. But you know that the Colorado home market has been crazy for years, but I know how to navigate it. I'm going to share it with you. Talk to my friends Dave and Mark at the Key Real Estate Group's Colorado Luxury Home Team. And when I say they're Colorado's luxury home team, doesn't mean you have to be in the market for a luxury home. You certainly can. But what we're talking about is the high-end luxury service that you get from Dave and Mark at Key Real Estate Group. Whether you're buying or selling, you need experts that know Colorado's market and know how to ride those highs and lows. And that means you need 2 things. You need experience and you need stability. Well, Key Real Estate Group's a privately held company with 25 years in the same offices. That's stable and it's personal. It's privately held. You're not dealing with one of the big companies, and you get who you get when you get that agent. You're dealing with Dave and Mark and their team. The Fed's expected to lower interest rates again in 2024, so you want to beat the competition and buy the home before that frenzy fully returns to Denver. Another rate cut means everyone's going to be out there buying, so you want to make sure you jump quick. Maybe you're thinking of a new build, obviously trying to construct as quickly as they can. Home builders are offering great incentives right now, especially for move-in, but you want to make sure you get all of them. So you can still have Dave and Mark represent you to make sure that you get everything you deserve. One way or another, in Colorado, if you're into buying or selling a home, you need an agent, and you need ones you can trust. And you need ones that will pick up when you call, not the big companies, someone who will respond to you. That's our friends at the Key Real Estate Group's Colorado Luxury Home Team. Here's how you get a hold of them. You call Dave and Mark today at 720-900-LIST. That's 720-900-LIST, or visit them at keyrealestategroup.com. For the Broncos, yes, the talk is about Bo Nix, of course. Courtland Sutton gets at least a tweak to his contract. Not a major adjustment, but a little bit as the Broncos try to throw him a bit of a bone and keep him happy. So that part is good. But the season might not really boil down to Bo Nix. It might not boil down to Courtland Sutton. In fact, if you're talking about where it's likeliest to have an impact, it's probably the Broncos pass rush. The Broncos pass rush, if it's good enough, will probably keep them in games. I think personally that the Nix-Payton combination will work. Doesn't mean he's going to become Tom Brady, but I think you'll see two guys that can be on the same page and work together. But the Broncos pass rush has to be consistent and it has to be better. And again, we talk about top end talent. The Broncos believe they have some, but it's complicated. Last year, when you're talking about the sack numbers, the Broncos had decent sack numbers, but they weren't overwhelming, obviously, and they were kind of performed as a group. Jonathan Cooper had 8.5 sacks. Nick Bonito had 8. Zach Allen had 5. Baron Browning, in the 10 games he played, had 4.5. Nobody else had more than 3. The Broncos don't have guys that are double-digit sack numbers. At least they haven't at this point in their career. They're hoping that either Cooper, Bonito, or Browning takes off and becomes that kind of guy. Bonito today in practice started a little bit, came up a little bit sore, did the rest of the day with workouts on the sideline. At the moment, not expected to be a big deal, but wanted to give you that update from practice today. Zach Allen had a chance to talk a little bit about this Broncos defensive line and the front seven because they have to get pressure on the quarterback. You know you're in an AFC West, you're going to face Patrick Mahomes twice. You're going to face Justin Herbert twice. And when you go through the AFC, just look at the quarterbacks that the Broncos are going to have to face. I mean, it is really sort of shocking right now, the array of talent in the AFC when you're talking about quarterbacks that you have to deal with. I mean, obviously, when you start the season off in Seattle, that's a little bit different. You're not worried about it. In Pittsburgh, you probably get Russell Wilson back, right? Aaron Rodgers will come into town, will be there with the Jets. The Broncos go to New York. You'll have to face Herbert twice, as we pointed out. You'll have to face Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. That's not going to be easy. And you'll have to face Deshaun Watson, as well as Anthony Richardson, as well as Joe Burrow. These are all the quarterbacks on the list for the Broncos schedule this year, just from the AFC alone, not counting guys like Kirk Cousins in the NFC. The pass rush has to be significantly better than it was in the last few years. And even though there's a lot of reasons to be excited about what you've seen, well, it still needs to be better. Allen talked a little bit about the challenges and the things that help about facing their revamped 4 returning starters, 3 of them very highly paid with Quinn Miners, but now trying to figure out who the new center is. Allen talked about facing that O-line in practice.
I mean, it obviously helps out a lot. And, last year going against them and this year, it makes the games easier. So we're really fortunate to have that. And, they're looking great so far. So it's going to be exciting to see how the year goes for them.
Now, the idea with the defensive line, obviously, is interesting. That was in flux as well. Now, Allen is back, as is DJ Jones in his last year of his contract with the Broncos. Jones moving back to the inside because the Broncos obtained a John Franklin Myers, first and foremost, from the Jets. Franklin Myers probably should not have been made available for the cost the Broncos got, but the Jets found themselves in a bit of a salary crunch, and the Broncos wisely took advantage. Allen had a chance to talk about all the additions to the defensive line in the offseason.
It's huge. Yeah. I mean, to have depth like that and guys who are playmakers, helps a lot and definitely much needed. And we're really happy to have them. And through the spring and, it's only been 2 days, no pads. They've looked really good. And I'm sure when we get the pads on, they'll look even better. So it's kind of an awkward time now when you don't have anything on. So we're looking forward to Monday.
So the Broncos are worried about, when it comes to pass rush, getting this done by committee, much like you think about the Seattle Seahawks back in Super Bowl 48. I know Broncos fans don't want to think about that for very good reason. But if you think about the way Seattle ran that, remember what they called their NASCAR package? They basically switched up a line, almost like a hockey line of guys that would come in and then pat rush the quarterback. The Broncos aren't trying to do something quite that dramatic, but they are trying to understand that they're going to pass rush by committee. When you talk about guys like Bonito, when you talk about Browning, when you talk about Jonathan Cooper, these guys are all now edge rushers. Drew Sanders was expected to join that. He's been hurt. Jonah Ellis, the draft pick for the Broncos, is expected to join that. So now you're talking about multiple waves of pass rushers. That's the objective. But to do that and to make that work, You have to be able to have everyone understanding their role, accepting their role, and being on the same page. Allen indicated that that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I think it's just aggressive and attacking, and I think, we're definitely there, and it's not just up front, it's all three levels, and guys are really bought into that now, and new coaches we brought in really, kind of believe in that. So, yeah, I mean, we have everybody on board, which is what you want, 100% buy-in. So that's the big thing.
It's Sean Payton's team, but it might be its previous head coach in Vance Joseph that ends up making some of the biggest differences, because the Broncos have to keep some of these teams in front of them. They can't get away and get a big lead, and then you have to ask Bo Nix to lead a stampede back into a game and try to get some wins. That's going to be too heavy a lift for the Broncos. Zach Allen, by the way, 68.8 pass rush rating when you're talking about Pro Football Focus. Among defensive linemen, that was 33rd. Not bad, not great. If you figure every team has two starting edge defensive linemen, well, there's 64 of them, and Allen came up 33rd, so it's okay. There's room for him to get better in the next year. I think last year was something of a disappointment, and perhaps this year there's an opportunity to get better. But Allen was okay. There's still reasons to believe, though, that the Broncos can get this done. Over at The Athletic, they assembled a couple of these pass rush groups for teams across the league and looked at the Pro Football Focus numbers on pressure rate and win rate. And for the Broncos, that's really something to be pretty excited about. Because if you take a look at the way that some of this shakes out, there's reasons for optimism. The Broncos are the only defense in the AFC that had 4 players that had a 14% or better pressure rate last year. So the idea of getting it done by committee perhaps is feasible. The Broncos do have that. The 4 were Baron Browning, John Franklin Myers, Jonathan Cooper, and Nick Bonito. Although Bonito, despite his 8 sacks, didn't actually play enough snaps to qualify among the league leaders, at least when Pro Football Focus breaks it down for the requisite number of snaps required. And that makes perfect sense when you're looking at the data in a wider view. But there were good numbers. Baron Browning, 15.1%, 29th in the NFL. John Franklin Myers with the Jets last year on the defensive line, 14.9% with the Jets. That's 31st in the NFL. Jonathan Cooper led the team in sacks, 14% pressure rate. That's 37th in the NFL. When you look at it and say your best rusher in pressure is 29th in the league, you're thinking, okay, that's probably not good enough. And you'd be right. But all of a sudden, if you're saying you have 3 in the top 37, well, that changes the calculus a little, right? It's different. It's better. It's still not overwhelming. The Broncos' high-end guys, they don't have Nick Bosa. They don't have Myles Garrett. They don't have those kind of guys. That's not going to happen right here out of the blue. But can you get enough done by sending waves after the quarterback? There's at least some evidence that you could. And when you talk about Nick Bonito, his win rate one-on-one via Pro Football Focus at 17.9% led all of the Broncos. And Bonito is the guy that, at least along with Browning, but Bonito in the end of last year, the way he finished, seems to be the guy with the biggest opportunity to make a leap forward. And there's a lot to like about the way these shake out too. Because again, if you're a Bronco fan and you're thinking of how do we bring these guys up and continue to turn them into quality players that you can count on for years to come, well, the NFL makes that tough for contract purposes, right? But think about this. At the same time, what did we discuss? Contract years. Contract years are valuable, right? Guys want to get paid. Well, talked about DJ Jones. Not that he's a big pass rusher, but he's a free agent after the year. Franklin Myers has 2 more years on his contract, but probably would love to be able to have a better year and get a raise from the $5 million he'll make this year. But Baron Browning, the $3.3 million the last year of his rookie deal, will be a free agent after the year. Jonathan Cooper will be a free agent after the year, $3.1 million this year. So you have 2 of your guys that are primary pass rushers that will be free agents after the year. If Bonito, who isn't a free agent until after the 2025 season, were to step up, Bonito presumably will be one of those guys that's staying, and Browning or Cooper might be on the way to another team. So this year, the make good roles for Baron Browning and Jonathan Cooper, they're significant. These are make or break years for their career. Browning needs to be able to stay healthy. Cooper needs to be able to prove that what he did last year, leading the team in sacks, wasn't a fluke. Now, I think all these things are entirely possible. The question is it going to be enough for the Denver Broncos? And that part, we just don't know. Because, yes, you have to find a way to make sure that you're getting rushing from the front three, in this case, Franklin, Myers, Jones, and Allen. And there isn't a reason to believe that you can do that. And then from the edge guys, when you're talking Benito and Cooper and Browning, you need to get consistent pressure too. At the same time, you have to get that pressure quickly because the Broncos secondary is in flux. Brandon Jones comes in to replace Justin Simmons. Pat Surtain is there. But the Broncos, when you're looking at actual competitions, ignore the quarterback spot. Look at the cornerback spot. That's where there's an actual competition. They're trying to find out who's on the other side of Pat Surtain. Will it be Levi Wallace, who they brought in from Buffalo? He probably gets the head start as the veteran, but I don't think the Broncos are attached to anybody. You're going to have to see a situation in which this pressure gets to quarterbacks. It's disruptive. It can get there quickly, and it can get there consistently. If you were to look at the Broncos fairly, you would look at the talent, and you'd say on that front seven, there is enough talent to disrupt the quarterback. But it is not top end. It is not in the idea where you have to double team a Myles Garrett. You have to make sure that Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa or Khalil Mack or those kind of guys don't go off on you like you've seen against the Broncos years before. Can they get it done by committee? I suppose so. The question is, when it's by committee, consistency is a question. And when you look at the early going here, when you're going to look at the practices, when you're going to look at preseason, that's going to probably tell a lot. If they can find a way to continue to make things effective and consistent by committee. Because obviously when you have the top tier guys, Micah Parsons, you name it, you know that every down they're coming. You know that every down you have to account for them. Right now, people are concerned about Jonathan Cooper. They're concerned about Baron Browning, concerned about Nick Benito, concerned about John Franklin Myers. They watch Zach Allen. You have to pay attention to where they are. But offensive coordinators aren't panicking. They're not looking at it and saying, what will we do if we don't stop that? The last person the Broncos had like that was number 58, Von Miller, where defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators had a chance to look at each other. And the offensive guys would say, okay, first step, the quarterback comes to the line. What do we do? Where's 58? The Broncos don't have that guy. And the truth is, they're not going to have that guy. Even if Franklin Myers and Allen and Benito and Browning, Cooper, anyone, Ellis, anybody steps up, they're not going to be Von Miller. So the Broncos have to find a way to manufacture this. And that's hard to do. The overall sack numbers can look good. The overall pressure numbers can look good, but you have to be able to bring it with consistency. And the pass rush for the Broncos may be what makes or breaks this season. So something to think about and something to keep an eye on the early going instead of just worrying about over a quarterback. We'll talk a little more about some of the Broncos outlooks from a betting perspective in just a couple of moments. But if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, then look no further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. As a DAC member, you'll enjoy top-notch amenities like a full fitness center, licensed childcare center, a spa, massage, Pilates, a golf simulator, and more. But what truly sets the DAC apart, what's kept it in the heart of Denver for more than 100 years, is that vibrant community. The member-owned club's all about you, offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, fun for the whole family. The Denver Athletic Club is truly a club for your whole life, and for a limited time right now, new members pay $0 in initiation fees. So join the Denver Athletic Club today. Go check them out, the Denver Athletic Club in the heart of Denver for more than a century. See what it's all about, because right now, no initiation fees. Jump on that while you can and find out everything that the DAC can do for you. Well, obviously, when we're getting near NFL season, the sports betting calendar starts to ramp up, and just a practice in, there are things to keep an eye out and look for when you're talking about the very nature of the Denver Broncos and what their future might be. And yeah, when you look at the betting world and the landscape there are ways to sort of look at the sports scene and the betting scene and understand that there are opportunities to overlap and evaluate. And to join us to break that down right now, the head of Mile High Sports, Nate Lundy. Of course, you know him as the host of You Bet Tonight. Nate, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, man. I'm happy to be able to be here, and betting season is upon us. Now, Shawn, you know this about me. And if you listen to the Fade 5 podcast with our good friend Brad Evans, everybody knows I don't like to bet too many futures. I don't like to tie up my money. I'm kind of greedy that way. But you're right. There are some ways that you can look at the NFL season right now and really start to get ahead. You can start to look for players, especially players sometimes in new situations. So not necessarily just rookies, but when we start talking about players that have found themselves in new uniforms, now you got something new that you can think about and maybe some spots that you want to play some money going into this 2024 season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you look at the NFL at large, the Chiefs are amazingly expected to be the first 3-time repeat champion in the history of the NFL, and that they're the favorites for a reason. And that makes, of course, the Broncos situation fraught. We understand that the Chiefs run the show. We also understand that the Chargers now, with Jim Harbaugh coming in, the presumption is with a healthy Justin Herbert, they should get a lot better, or at least the consistency that they have been lacking over the years should be able to arrive. And all that factors into the Broncos. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's start a little bit with the idea. Courtland Sutton gets his new contract adjustment. Let's not call it a new contract. Basically, he had some incentives added, gives him a little opportunity to make another $1.5 million, kind of a happy medium, I guess, to make sure that the Broncos don't have to deal with this. I explained earlier in the show before you came on why Courtland Sutton is unquestionably the number one target for whoever is quarterbacking. Spoiler alert, it'll be Bo Nix as long as he's healthy. But Sutton last year had such an interesting season because when we broke down the stats earlier, he was 57th in the league in receptions with only 59. He was 44th in the league in yardage with 772, but he was tied for 4th in the league with the 10 touchdowns. What player is Courtland Sutton really?
Well, I mean, I think, it sounds like kind of a cop-out answer, Shawn, but I think we both know that he's probably somewhere in the middle. He doesn't deserve that double-digit touchdown expectation, in part because of the quarterback situation, and in part because it's really hard for him to repeat that when it's not something that we've seen him have a track record of. Right? I mean, it was kind of an EKG meter. It just went whoop, and it, took a big high blip. And then I think we expect it to wind up coming back down. I'm not going to be very surprised if that happens. But here's what I find really interesting, Shawn, that's happening in the betting markets as we look ahead to the season. And remember, if folks are thinking about this from a fantasy football perspective, in addition to a sports betting perspective, these guys in Vegas, the wise guys, the algorithm guys, know what they're doing. And so when you see these numbers, I think you have to recognize that there's probably a reason that number is set the way it is. So let's look at two numbers here for Courtland Sutton for this upcoming season, okay? His total yardage over under is at 800. It's at 800 flat, basically 800.5. So we're looking for him to have 801, or we're looking for him to have 799, right? It's going to be somewhere in that range. That's what we're talking about here with Courtland Sutton. And so I think what you have to ask yourself, if you're from a betting perspective when it comes to Courtland Sutton here, with specifically his yardage, I'll talk touchdowns in a second, but his yardage has to come down to, what do you believe Sean Payton is going to want to do in terms of running the ball? Are there going to be a lot of opportunities for Courtland Sutton to put a lot of yardage up? Or are we looking at something where, if you play the numbers game here in a 17-game season, are we just looking for him to have about 50 yards a game? I mean, is that basically what we're talking about? So I find that 800.5 yardage number really fascinating for him. I personally would lean a little bit to the under, because I think there's a lot of question marks on this team. And it's not because I don't think Sutton is talented. I do think he's talented. I just think there's a lot of question marks about what Sean Payton is going to do, not only with a rookie quarterback, but just with this offense in general as he starts to acclimate these new guys in. Now, here's the fun one for you, Shawn. Forget the yardage for a second. I went and looked it up. His over-under on touchdowns for 2024 in the regular season is 5.5. That is where it sits. You and I were talking earlier about the idea that it might be at like 6.5. It's actually at 5.5. And folks, it is plus odds, meaning a good payday for you, plus 110 to the over. People don't think he's going to get to a half a dozen touchdowns. I would stay away from this one because I actually think 5 might be the number for him. I really do think that's kind of an accurate number. I think the odds makers have done a good job. But Shawn, if I handed you $100, where are you going with it?
I'm probably going on the under. And this is with the Courtland Sutton numbers over the last 3 seasons where he's at least been healthy, right? The 10 touchdown season was obviously a bit of a blip because over the last 3 years, he has a total of 14.
Right.
And he's been healthy for those. So 10 out of his 14 touchdowns in the last 3 seasons came last season. So thinking that's going to happen, he's only exceeded he's only had 6 or more touchdowns twice. 2019, his second year before the injuries really hit, and then last year, which feels very fluky when you had 4 touchdowns the previous 2 years and then jumped to 10. So I'm probably going under on that. And you talk about the yardage too. Here's his last 3 years. 2021, 776 yards. 829 in 2022, 772 in 2023. 2 of the last 3 years under that as well. But the funny thing is, on the yardage, I think I'd go over, because
Really?
I think that Bo Nix and Sean Payton are going to be on the same page. I think you're going to see the ball thrown around a little bit. And I think, given the fact there is no clear answer at tight end for receiving, you don't necessarily know what they're going to do with the running backs. I think that the lion's share of these passes are probably going to go to Sutton. But what does he have to break? Think about it. Last year, Nate, with 772 yards, you think about, what does that take per game? You said, are we looking to get him 50 a game? He didn't even get 50 a game. That's 48.3. So, I mean, when you're talking about 800 yards, yeah, it's pretty minimal. I think Sutton will get the yards, but I don't think he'll get the touchdowns.
All right, I can see that happening, because I do think that scoring is going to be at a premium with this Broncos squad. I think that we're going to be looking at touchdowns getting spread out. I think if you are a fantasy player, I'm probably shying away from a lot of what the Broncos have offensively, if not all of it, until it's proven. I think there's some better options out there, including better options from a rookie standpoint, I think, if you're looking at it from a pure fantasy perspective and not necessarily sports betting. But I'm with you. I could see him getting to the yards.
I think it'll be close either way.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, these guys know what they're doing. And I tell you, one of the things, there's all these different guides and things you can study when you're doing your season-long fantasy. And as big as sports betting has become, and as much as I do that in my day-to-day life, I still do season-long fantasy. And I'll tell you, there's all the different guides and all the people, and Matthew Berry and all those guys that are out there. I will tell you right now, I pay more attention to what the odds makers are setting on over-unders than anything else, because of how accurate these guys have proven to be over the years, especially in the NFL.
Well, the last 3 years, on average, I gave you those numbers, but the average for the last 3 years for Courtland Sutton is 792 receiving yards. So 8 away from that number. So, I mean,
can he break a tackle? Can he do something to be able to help us out? That's really all. Shawn, we might as well correlate this and talk about the quarterback, and talk about Bo Nix. By the way, I can tell you from a running back standpoint, nothing for Javonte Williams, nothing for Jaleel McLaughlin. Nothing is out there from a running back perspective for the Broncos at this point from the odds makers, which is not a big surprise. There are a lot of question marks there. So it does not surprise me at all that we don't have anything from the running back position. But we do have a yardage total set for Bo Nix, believe it or not. 2,800. That's the number. 2,800.5 yards is what we're looking for out of Bo Nix. Now, I'll go ahead and do the math for you. If you were to assume that he could do all 17 games, and that's a big if, y'all. If you assume he does all 17 games, you're looking basically for him to hit the over, he needs to average 165 yards a game. That's what you would need out of Bo Nix to be able to hit the over. I don't know that happens. I'm leaning to the under on 2,800 yards for Bo Nix.
See, I think he's going to be over 3,000 yards. I feel pretty comfortable that he'll be over 3,000 yards. I just think with the 17th game, I think the number is not so daunting as it used to be. So I think, presuming health, I think he's probably going to get the vast majority of the starts, maybe 16, you try to avoid injury. I think he'll get over that. But the question is, how much will that really matter for the Broncos? Touchdowns, I don't know. I think they'll be chasing. I think there's going to be negative game scripts for this team. They're not expected to win. A lot more on that in a minute. But I think he gets over it. But I do get the point, because what Payton wants to do with Nix is to make sure he's hitting the middle of the field, hoping to get guys into space, let receivers kind of run and get the yards after catch. But we don't know if that's going to be Troy Franklin. Is that going to be Marvin Mims? Is that going to be Josh Reynolds? Is that going to be Brandon Johnson? He was second on the team in touchdown receptions last year. He's still around. Or is it going to be some of the running backs? We don't really know. So, yeah, there's a lot of variability in that. My guess is that nowadays, if you start 16 or more games, quite frankly, it's pretty hard not to throw for 3,000 yards. We're a long way from the 80s and John O having 3,000 yard seasons and people thinking he's a mad bomber throwing it all over the place. So I think he can get over that, but I don't know how much it impacts the Broncos' bottom line. And I guess let's move to that. Over at USA Today, They predicted that the Broncos would finish 4-13. The only teams with equal or worse records, the Giants and the Carolina Panthers. This seems to be kind of what's the general vibe around the national media, around the Broncos, that you can get over their individual wins and losses, but probably they're one of the bottom 3 teams in the league overall. The Broncos over-under win total is 5.5, which means for you to actually win that bet, they just have to go 6-11. For Broncos fans who look at it and say, well, they went 8-9 last year, and now they have a Bo Nix, a quarterback, they're thinking that's easy. I bet you and I are probably not on that kind of mindset.
No, we're not. I frankly, feet to the fire, would bet the under on this one. I believe this is a 5-12 team. And I think, frankly, they're probably, just in terms of the overall numbers, I think you're staring at the number 2 pick next April. I personally believe the worst team in the league is going to be New England. I know you were talking about what USA Today had to say about the Giants and the Panthers. I think the Giants and the Panthers are in that mix, but I think New England is going to be the worst team in the league. So you put that, maybe New England winds up with the number 1 overall pick. Here's the thing that I think plays into the other reason why I might take the under on the 5.5, which, by the way, if you think they're going to win 6 games, it's even money at plus 100 over at Caesars. Part of the reason that I do the under on this is, Shawn, think about the overall dynamic of this Broncos team for a second. So we can talk about some talent. We can say they got Bo Nix. We can talk about those kinds of things. But think about the overall dynamic of what's going to happen to this team over the course of the next 18 months. Because what you're looking at is, by this time next year, actually by this time next April, you're going to be looking at a team that has, 9 figures under the cap?
Right.
By the time you get the Russell Wilson money off the books.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a massive amount of money that you can spend in free agency. Then all of a sudden, if you're a team that is sitting with the number 2 pick, okay, let's say maybe it's the number 3 pick. Well, we know how quarterback starved teams are in the NFL. So if you're sitting there at number 2 or at number 3, is there somebody behind you that is desperate for a quarterback? I'm looking at you, Giants. I'm looking at you, potentially, Carolina. Looking at a lot of teams that might be desperate at the quarterback position or might be staring retirement in the face, New York Jets. So all of those teams might say, well, hey, Denver, what do you want for us to take that 2 pick off your back, or that 3 pick? So could you all of a sudden be Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos organization and the Walton Penners and say, okay, wait a minute, we've got 9 figures that we can spend under the cap. We've got an ace in our pocket of a top pick, which either could be a stellar, player that you've had your eye on, or could be the perfect trade bait. The reason I say all of this is, I know we all want them to win, but I think there is not just one eye, but a little more than that of this organization that is paying attention to what is coming in the next 2 or 3 years, and they're thinking ahead. And if they went 5-12, would it be the end of the world for them? No, because come next April, they would have so much in their arsenal that they could use to build this team up that they might not care if it means the learning curve with Bo Nix and losing some games.
Yeah, we talked about this a little earlier in the program. The Broncos only have 3 players on their roster that have a $10 million or more cap hit right now. 3 in total. That's it. Now, it makes a big jump forward in 2026. That's when Quinn Minor's deal pops in, as well as a bunch of other players. More dead cap money actually has to also come onto effect for the 2025 season. The Broncos, to my mind, are building right now by actions, if not words, for 2026. And as it stands right now today, going into the 2026 season with contracts on the books, the Broncos would have $229 million in cap space. That's when they're looking at making their next run. That number is ludicrous. And when you think about the moving on from Justin Simmons, when you're letting Lloyd Cushenberry go, when you're moving along from players that are valuable, that's what the plan is, Nate. This is about building for 2026, one way or the other, when the Broncos believe they can really maybe get back to the playoffs and make some noise. And I think that's worth thinking about in any of the times you're talking about bets, fantasy. Any part of it is trying to figure out what the objective for the Broncos really is. This year, it's learn what you have, cut the excess fat, do it probably again, and build in 2025. And in 2026, assuming Bo Nix is your guy, then the Broncos start making moves forward.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And look, I don't think this team is going to tank. I don't think that is going to be the case
they're
by
not
any
very
stretch.
good.
But
That's
they're
the
also
reality.
not good, and they're in a really difficult division. Let me give you the other win totals. Broncos, as you said, are sitting at 5.5. That's the over under 5.5. I told you it's plus odds if you want to play the over at a plus 100, even money at Caesars, meaning if you bet 100, you win 100. Okay. The over under for the Raiders, 6.5. That's where it sits for Vegas. The over under for the Chargers, a flat 9, by the way. The hook is not there. It is a flat 9 for Jim Harbaugh and the LA Chargers. And then the Chiefs number sits at 11.5 in terms of their win total. Well, you can start to dive a little deeper if you want to have some fun, if you will, within the win totals. So let me give you a couple of examples. You can actually dive in and do bets specifically in the division. All right. So, Shawn, watch this one. We had the Broncos at a 5.5 win total. Okay. So over under total wins, 5.5. Their over under in win totals in the division is 2.5. So now you could start to drill down. If you're a fan that says, well, I'm a little nervous there, but what can they do in the division? If you think they can win 3 division games over the course of the season, you're going to get that. You're going to get that at plus 150. You can see the odds makers throwing things at you. All right. They're 101. They're 100 to 1 to win the conference. Okay. They're 16 to 1 to win the division. They're 250 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. There's only one team with worse odds to win the Super Bowl, and that's New England. All right. So this is one of those that you just look at and you've got to be able to say, all right, you know what? Let me find some other futures on the other 31 teams. And let me sit back and just be a fan of this squad and pay attention to what's happening at Mile High and at Dove Valley. And let me see if this team is building back to where my expectations as a Broncos fan exist.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to tackle it. And by the way, we'll be tackling Broncos camp tomorrow. We will be live from Dove Valley. We want to remind you to tune in earlier tomorrow. 11 a.m. will be the broadcast time, and Nate Lundy will be sitting right next to me as we're out at Broncos camp, broadcasting live from Dove Valley, bringing you the latest there. So looking forward to sitting down with you tomorrow, Nate, and getting back at it. It's going to be like 99 degrees and hot and humid. It feels like Broncos camp again.
Yeah, I was going to say that's exactly what Broncos camp is supposed to feel like. It's supposed to be way too hot. Alfred Williams is supposed to be somewhere walking around complaining about how hot it is. That's an annual tradition for us, is having Alfred tell us it's way too damn hot. So I'm definitely used to that one. I will leave you with this, Mr. Drotar, as we sign off here from Talking Sports Betting. I told you some of the value you can find exists in other teams and in other bets. What if I could give you, Shawn, plus 100 odds, even money, that Caleb Williams would be the leading yardage quarterback amongst the rookies? Let me remind you.
Amongst the rookies?
Amongst the rookies. Even money. And let me remind you that the new Chicago Bears starter
Can I just throw my wallet at the screen now?
Exactly. And DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, Cole Kmet, and oh, by the way, DeAndre Swift coming out of the backfield.
Yeah.
Even money. If that guy stays healthy, he should run away with the yardage lead amongst the rookie quarterbacks in 2024.
I think Caleb Williams is going to end up in the top 5 in yards, period. Because of the nature of the division they're in, the situation the Bears are going to be in a lot of the time. I mean, I think he's going to have a massive year in yards. That's a no-brainer.
I just throw that out there as we're leaving. If people are looking, and again, that bet even money at DraftKings.
Woo. Okay. We'll keep that in mind too. And remember, you can always go to Mile Sports and go to Colorado Sports Betting, and you can check out all those offers that we have as well. We put them all together for you, so it's easy for you to jump in if you haven't. But wow, that Caleb Williams one, that's enticing. Well, looking forward to tomorrow out at Dove Valley, Nate. Appreciate the insight, and we'll do this again in a little less than 24 hours.
You got it.
All right, appreciate it. Nate Lundy from Mile High Sports, the president there, and of course the man with the betting plan. We'll be back at it tomorrow. They're live. Looking forward to that as well. We'll get to the Colorado Rockies in a moment. You had a moment dismissing the Boston Red Sox, but want to remind you that the folks at the Constitute Health are trying to help you when you're talking about optimizing your own health. You are your own person, right? And it's not cookie cutter for everybody. Not everybody has the same needs. Not everybody has the same wants. Maybe you want something for your health different than other people. Maybe you'd like to lose weight. Maybe someone else would like to have a little bit more energy. Maybe someone else would like to balance a little with hormones or peptides or things like that. Well, obviously, that takes a little bit of work. And the folks at Constitute Health do their best to make sure they work with you so you can optimize your health in the way you want to. They're empowering patients on their own journey, complementing existing healthcare, using relationships with the premier compounding pharmacies in America. So obviously, to learn about that for yourself, you need to dig deep. You have to make sure that you get a blood test, you get all the things that you can learn about yourself. And then the trained medical professionals over at Constitute consult you on a one-to-one basis, providing the patients with total transparency regarding their health, their concerns, and then you'll discuss your goals with them. And then they provide options then that will make things easy for you with a patient-first philosophy so you can optimize your health in the way you want to do it. All the therapies that you're looking for, they can burn fat, assist with weight loss, optimize sleep and your sleep cycles, enhance the cognitive functions, retain muscle mass, other personal benefits, with hormone replacement, semaglutide, GLP-1 therapies, peptides, NAD+, you name it, they can take care of it at Constitute Health. So mention MHS and get $50 off your initial blood work and consultation. Or when you go to Mile High Sports website, you can click that link. Check them out online at constitutehealth.com. The Colorado Rockies yesterday tied a franchise record 20-7 win over the Boston Red Sox in their matinee game yesterday out at Coors Field. Started with a bang. Ezekiel Tovar goes off again, a home run, his 17th of the season, 2 more hits for Tovar. He's now on an 11-game hitting streak, blazing hot. And then when you finally thought that Tovar was going to take over the home run lead, he was tied with Michael Toglia and Brendan Doyle coming into the game with his 17th. Later in the game, Brendan Doyle took Ezekiel Tovar's home run and said, well, that was nice, but let me give you the grand salami.
High fly ball, deep left field, way back. Take a good look, you won't see it for long. How about a grand slam for Brent Doyle?
Brendan Doyle's first career grand slam led the way. I mean, there's so many ridiculous numbers on this game. It's kind of hilarious. 20-7, again, tying the Rockies record in runs. The Red Sox were just a mess in this game. The only thing that went right for Alex Cora was that he got a new 3-year contract extension. Probably not the day you want to announce it, but worked out pretty well. A little bit interesting earlier in the game. Obviously, it got out of hand pretty quickly. The Rockies got going right off the bat. I mean, the Rockies scored runs in the first, second, third, fourth, sixth, and seventh innings. And by the time after the fourth inning had elapsed, already at that point, the game was 13-3. But in that fourth inning, a little bit of drama there. The benches end up clearing as Cal Quantrill, who was very, very good again, not spectacular, but solid. 6 good innings out there. And then a little bit of a scuffle. Reese McGuire and Quantrill got into it. Quantrill pumped his fist after getting him to fly out to the top of the fourth. Of course, it's a blowout for the Rockies at the time. Reese McGuire had an issue with it. Quantrill had a couple of choice words to say. You can find them on the internet. A little bit of feistiness from a Colorado Rockies team that is still 38-65. But after the game, manager Bud Black had an opportunity to talk about the benches clearing, as did Cal Quantrill.
I mean, we've seen Cal numerous times, as you know, big out or the third out of an inning when there's traffic in a critical part of the game. We've seen him show emotion. So today was no different. I mean, Cal, shows that emotion, competitive spirit. And again, from there, I don't know exactly what happened, right? And then all of a sudden we got the dust up, and then here comes everybody. So after it quieted down, again, I just, we took our warnings from the umpires and continued to play baseball.
I recognize we were up by whatever we're up by, but I celebrate when I get important outs, and he took offense to it. Some words were exchanged. It's baseball. We'll all move on.
Bingo. I mean, Quantrill's absolutely on the money. Jacob Stallings, after the game, by the way, said, I know who caught that game and had his own home run, by the way. Said, quote, I knew Reese from our Pirates days, and I knew Cal wasn't yelling at Reese initially. I just wanted to calm things down before anything got too crazy. Stallings did run out and make sure that things obviously the bench is cleared, but it turned out to be nothing. Look, this is simple. The Red Sox were getting blown out. They were going to travel after the game. They were embarrassed. They had their first 4-error game in a long time. They were just was terrible. The Rockies were very good. It was both things happening simultaneously. And the Red Sox just got upset. One of the things about baseball that I think has gotten a lot better, there are many things about baseball that's gotten a lot better. It's very interesting. Out of the four major sports, baseball, hockey, basketball, and football, only baseball in the last 3 years, its average ticket buyer has gotten younger. That's remarkable. And it's probably the sport that no one would have expected it to be that way. But speeding the game up, changing the pace, the pitch clock, making sure you can just walk guys intentionally by just sending them to first. All of these things have made the game more entertaining, faster paced, reducing the dead time between the action, and you get more action. The other part of it that's interesting is some of baseball's really profoundly dumb unwritten rules. And I played baseball my whole life. Love the sport to death. It's my absolute favorite. But some of its unwritten rules are just simply stupid. Obviously, when someone dunks on a guy and posterizes him in the NBA and hangs on the rim for a second, well, okay, that's what happens. You don't want to get posterized? Don't get dunked on. Play better defense, right? That's the way it works in sports in general. In football, you beat the guy, you get over the top, you score a touchdown, you get to dance, you get to celebrate, you get to do whatever. Fine. That's the way it goes. Don't want to get beat? Don't let your guy score. But for some reason in baseball, there's still this old silly notion that if you do something good at an important time, you can't celebrate. Cal Quantrill had traffic. Obviously, the Rockies were ahead, but we've seen games in Coors Field get a little squirrely. You find a way to finish it, and you pump your fist a little bit and talk a little bit. Okay, fine. Big deal. And you know what? You don't want the pitcher to pump his fist? Then don't get out. I don't have a problem. I've never had a problem with the idea. You launch some ball, you have a moonshot, you hit a home run, and you want to pump your fist going around the base. Well, good for you. You deserved it. You earned it. If you're the pitcher and you don't like that, well, don't serve up a fatty next time, right? That solves the problem. And you know what? The same thing goes in reverse. If you strike a guy out in a critical moment, if you go ahead and get an out when you need to get an out, you pump your fist a little bit, well, you deserve it too. You don't like it, then get on base. That's the way it works in every other sport. But in some reason in baseball, there's this very stupid, outdated idea that at a certain point in time, you must be so far ahead that everyone's just kind of got to mail in the rest of the game. That shouldn't happen. And baseball, fortunately, has gotten rid of it. You let guys celebrate more. They're starting to come around to the understanding that, you know what? People like watching when the athletes do something special, they get to celebrate. All of the teams that you've seen start to have home run celebrations, right? They always have you're starting to see teams have little things that you get in the dugout, whether it's a dance, whether it's a move, whether it's a fun handshake, whether it's, in the Rockies case now, a sort of off purple ski helmet with a bright purple set of ski goggles that after you hit a home run, you wear it in the dugout for a little while. That's fun. I'm not going to quote Kevin Costner because it's a rated R quote, but baseball, it's fun. It's fun, okay? It's a fun sport. Have some fun with it. And this kind of silliness, the Rockies did the right job with it. Quantrill pitched well. Quantrill's having an amazing year. He is 7-7. And you're thinking, well, Shawn, that's not an amazing year, 7-7. But he's pitching in Coors Field. He has a 4.09 ERA, and he's 7-7. He's 500 on a team that is 27 games under 500. The Rockies are 38-65 after this win, 27 games under 500. And somehow Cal Quantrill is a 500 pitcher on that team in Coors Field. He's having a tremendous year. And it's one of the things the Rockies have to think about. Quantrill signed through this year. If you're going to jumpstart this rebuild, because guess what? Tovar looks for real. Doyle looks for real. You just picked Charlie Condon. He's coming. It won't take him very long. Zach Veen is promising. Duromo is promising. Yes, they have to deal with better pitching. They've got to work on that. Chase Dolander is still a ways away, but starting to look pretty good. The Rockies have actually talent bubbling up. Some of this is working. Nolan Jones is having a bad year. He's not a bad player. Michael Toglia is starting to actually hit the ball a little better. We know about the power. Maybe the rest of it's going to come. You found Jacob Stallings out of nowhere. Granted, he's a journeyman and he's 30 plus, but could he hold it down for the rest of the year? He could. The trade deadline is on the 30th. The Rockies should be looking at trading a guy like Quantrill as well as he's played. If you're not going to sign him, move him. Because on a good team, if he's 500 on a team that's 27 games under, what's he going to be on a good team, right? When he's the start in the back end. You can jumpstart the rebuild, and the Rockies could actually start doing something if they get aggressive. They start a 10-game road trip on Friday. That'll start against the Giants. And then if the Rockies were to make the right moves, even despite the record, there would be things to get excited about at 20th and Blake because they have found themselves in a spot where some of that talent is real, it's interesting, it's exciting, and if they continue to boost it, if you were to trade Cal Quantrill, if you were to trade Elias Diaz, and yes, even Ryan McMahon, all of a sudden you start looking like a team that has a clear plan for youth that over the next couple of years could build. We'll see what they do next week. But obviously, the 10-game road trip is next on the list. Rockies are off today. Kyle Freeland, who's pitched much better since his return from injury, will take the hill against Kyle Harrison of the Giants on Friday, and we'll let you know more about that over the course of next week. But obviously, going to be all Broncos starting tomorrow. 11 a.m. is the start. Join us then. Of course, you can always catch it on demand, but it will go live 11 a.m. Nate Lundy will be sitting in with me. We will be on the sidelines as practice at Dove Valley commences, and we'll be there every day broadcasting live for you at training camp practice. So if we see you out there, wave, say hi. I'm sure I'll be able to see you from over there. I will absolutely wave back. So looking forward to getting everyone out there. We're talking about some football tomorrow. Thanks so much for Nate Lundy for joining us. He'll be back with me, as I mentioned, tomorrow, 11 a.m. We'll be back at it. So make sure you tune in there. Thanks to everyone who watched the program, consumed the program, listened to it, however you did it, whether you're on demand, whether you check it afterwards, whether you're listening right now. Really appreciate it. If you're catching it on the YouTube channel, hit subscribe. That'll give you an opportunity to know what we're talking about before we go live and let you know when we go live as well. And again, tomorrow, that's 11 a.m. from Dove Valley on the sidelines, broadcasting live when the Broncos will be at training camp. Danny Bailey is the man that makes all of this work. Everything you see, everything you hear, all thanks to Danny Bailey. And it's really, really brutal that the camera isn't the other way because he's a much more handsome guy than I am anyway. But, thank goodness it allows me to at least have some sort of job. So I really appreciate that Danny only stays on that side of it and lets at least me have a chance to remain employed. We'll be back at it. Thanks for catching the show. We'll be back at it at Dove Valley tomorrow, 11 a.m. Broncos practice. Be there. We most certainly will be. I'm going to step aside, but you don't have to go anywhere. Live, local, independent. You're in the best spot for Denver sports news. This is Mile High Sports.